Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. Today's topic is about driving sustainable procurement, initiating green initiatives, and inclusive practices. First of all, I'd like to introduce myself and Karin. My name is Carrie Chiu. I'm the principal at Efficio. For those who aren't familiar with Efficio, we are the world's largest independent procurement and supply chain consultancy. We partner with our clients across the globe to drive transformations and establish them as a high-value generating functions within their business. Today, we have a very great honor to have Karin online and also participants from all over the world. And really thank you for those who joined the webinar. I see people start coming in as well. Whenever you are in the world, it seems there will be different time zones as well. So really appreciate for those who joined today. So for the guest and the key star today, Karin, who is the Chief Commercial Officer at SmartDCC and a board member at Rotork. She's one of the most inspirational leaders that I've ever met. So Karin, over to you. Would you tell us a bit more about yourself and SmartDCC?
Oh, thank you very much, Carrie, for that fantastic introduction. So I'm really, really honored and happy to be here today. It's one of my, topic that is very close to my heart. So DCC, most of you probably don't know what DCC is doing. So we are actually designing and rolling out and managing and running the smart metering network in Britain. So, green and environmental is in the heart of what we do and very, very close to our purpose. We are, making Britain more digital and connected so that we can, all lead a smarter, greener life. That is our sort of vision statement. And over the last year, we have saved over 1.1 million tons of carbon over the past year. So our smart meter network today, we have roughly 30 million meters out there. And because smart metering gives data, it also drives people's behavior. People are, how they consume data, how they consume energy, how they, sell back to the grid, and what tariff they are using. So really, really important also, this data goes back, normalized data go back to the government, and it forms the future policy of energy in Britain. So we take environmental and responsible business extremely important for us, and we also have a bonus that is goes across the whole company, affecting everybody's bonus that is around the carbon reduction. And that means that the whole company rally around to try to work together in order to, meet that corporate objective. The only other thing I wanted to say is that because everything we do via our supply chain. And that's why it's so important for us to work very closely with our suppliers. And the biggest impact we can do is obviously to get in responsible supplier in our procurement process. Supplier that are, responsible, want to work with us, to reduce carbon, also looking at the social impact, inclusivity, etc. So that is our biggest impact. And that's why for us, working with our supply chain means that we can reduce scope 3, which is probably, over 90% of our total emission.
That's great. Thank you, Karin, for the introduction. So let's get into the first topic. From what I understand, SmartDCC is a responsible business that bears great social responsibility. And we have a mission to the end customer, not only to allow them and enable them to choose energy suppliers as they like, and also in the longer term is to reduce carbon emission and also reduce energy costs as well. So it's great in terms of the SmartDCC business model, how we treat the end customers, be responsible for the government and the society. So can you share how SmartDCC has incorporated all these ESG elements into the procurement process?
No, very great question, Carrie. So we've done a couple of things. So one of our biggest procurement that we have, almost finalized, we piloted to put in ESG weighted questions, and as much as 10%, which is actually absolutely aligned to the government approach, where we, so to say, early on in the procurement phase, asked all of these questions, not only about environmental, but also around the social, social and governance aspect. And that went really well. And that means that we're now rolling out this ESG weighted question across all procurements over 1 million. And we hope to have that implemented by this financial year, which finish in, end of March next year. We're also adding ESG terms in all our contracts. And we now also have an annual supplier survey with all our suppliers that also includes ESG questions. So there is a lot of things we're doing around, getting in, upfront, getting in supplier that are responsible, want to work with us to drive down the emission and to do social good. Because as a licensed monopoly, as we are, we also have a responsibility, as you said, Carrie, to society, to government, to the whole of Britain, to drive inclusivity. We want to be in everybody's home, so not just part of it, not only the people that can afford it. It should be across, ubiquitous over the whole Great Britain. And we really operate to the highest standard. We are deemed CNI, so critical national infrastructure. So it's really, really important how we treat, data. So that's another thing. We want to work with suppliers that have a very, very high security standard as well.
That's great. I have one really interesting question that I wanted to follow up, because there's a lot of saying about ESG usually came at a price. How is your experience so far in terms of adding these weighting of ESG questions and criteria into supplier decision? How to balance the cost and quality? And in your experience, do you found it suppliers that are doing really well in ESG aspect are more expensive?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. I think, for me, it's a little bit, I think there are a lot of people, exactly as you say, things that ESG always comes to at a cost, which I don't think is actually true anymore, because there are also great examples where the best greener solution is actually not the most expensive. So, for example, cloud storage, you use less space, cheaper, and it's greener. So it's also to try to home into these solutions that is satisfy both cost, environmental aspect, and less space, etc. have a lot of different benefits. However, when it comes to certain aspects, in certain occasions, there are more costly with a green solution. What we have done is we're looking at a certain threshold we think is a hygiene factor. So before the bidders or the suppliers even have a chance to bid a price, we actually do something we call selection questionnaire, SQ. And for those that knows about procurement, they know that is a standard process in procurement. So we put a lot of ASG questions in there already. So you can say we're screening people or screening the bidders already then, before we even have a chance to see what the price is. So that's one way to do it. Another way to look at it is also looking at long-term versus short midterm. So again, it's a commercial aspect there. So yes, if you, for example, rent facility space that is very much greener but more expensive, you can look at the longer payback time and see, okay, it's more expensive up front, but it will be offset by, for example, energy bills being much cheaper, in the long run. So we're looking at all of this aspect, and it is tricky. It is tricky to kind of, balancing all of that. But I think if you are a responsible business, you need to work with responsible suppliers that not only looking at cost. We had to look at quality, cost, environmental impact, responsibility around everything, Obviously, modern slavery, all of that type of thing is really important for us.
That's great to hear. And can you describe the SmartDCC journey on this aspect? Have you met any challenges with stakeholders in terms of agreeing, putting on, like, is it 10%, 5%, 20% weighting on sustainability measurements?
So I think, in general speaking, it's been really positive, and it hasn't been, significant pushback. However, I think the enthusiasm in this area is very much tied to how mature the supplier is in this space. So I think that's one thing. So if a supplier is very mature, and often that goes with size, then they have been more maybe positive to work with us. However, we also notice that we actually have differentiated the way we work with suppliers. Certain suppliers that maybe are smaller, they have certain skill set that we can tap into, and certain, relationship. So we have to just work different with different supplier, and I think that's been really positively welcome. That approach. The other thing we have done is we looked at where can we make the most impact. The most impact is often the big supplier that we have the biggest spend with. So our top 8, 10 is standing for 80-85% of our spend. So we're trying to work with them. So we have set up something we call the Sustainability Supplier Forum with the top 8, 10 suppliers. So we want to bring the supplier with us on this journey. So it's not just things that is pushed upon them. They feel like they're part of our journey. And for us, who is not mid-sized company, around 700 people and 750 million spend per year, pounds, we also can learn. We have big suppliers, the likes of, IBM, Vodafone, big suppliers, Toshiba, etc. And it's really, really good for us to see what they are doing. So we incorporate their expertise, their ideas and perspective into our strategy, around this. So that's something. So we have noticed, that collaborative. What do you say? When you collaborate with the suppliers, then it's really good, because then we identify opportunities that is beneficial on both sides. So it's not just beneficial for us, but for them as well, which means that drives even, a very, very good culture around this.
Yeah.
So generally speaking, very positive.
That's great. That's great. Can you also share some potential success stories, good stories that you can share with us in terms of encouraging suppliers to also reduce the carbon footprint, work towards SmartDCC visions, and embrace the principles of circular economy?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the success stories I wanted to share is, we have something we call comms hubs. This is a box, and that is manufactured, and is often manufactured abroad. And our comms hub supplier, we really wanted to talk to them around, how do we reduce carbon footprint, but also, how do we increase synergies, efficiency, drive costs down, and also, taking us uncertainty in planning, etc. And because these are manufactured abroad, there is a lot of shipping. So by sitting together with them, sharing data across, both them and us, and go step by step through the life cycle and see, and look at every single step of that journey. Is there a way we can do it more efficient? Is it the way we can do it cheaper? Is it the way we can do it with less impact on the environment? And after doing that, we came up with 3 areas, We flatlined our ordering systems so we could ship full containers. And that had an added benefit, because if they take out the uncertainty or, have a better forecast, then they can run the factories, fully. And, if you run on 80%, you still have to have the same energy, you have to have the light on in the whole factory, etc. So they really like that, so they can be more efficient, per unit. And then also we swapped, some of the transport in locally in UK were done on lorries, and now we swapped that to rail. That was another thing. And then we also saw that it wasn't very efficient in the way this, comms hubs or, meters, for example, were delivered out to the customers, to our customers. So they were delivered and then came back, etc. So we started to do a milk run, as we call it, milk run ruta. So you have multi-stops. So you kind of, make sure you have a journey and then you stop at each location. So, and that has also, delivered a savings in both cost and carbon emission. And I think what they have told us, it has an added commercial benefit, that if they have better forecast, that also means that they can plan better when it comes to shipment. So they can ship things by boat, by sea, instead of flying, air freight, which means that, that's 80% savings in carbon. So just sitting down together and openly discuss of how can we be more efficient, but not only taking cost out, but also taking carbon out. And now the next step with them is, of course, to look at the circular economy. How do we, dispose of comms hubs? How can we, think about a way to produce them in an environmentally friendly way, etc. So there is a lot of things, and the smallest things, every little things add up. And then also we're doing things, of course, internally. Thinking about every time when we, for example, onboarding people, we used to have a lot of plastic and things like that. And my head of sustainability, she makes sure that, all of that type of things we are, putting the mirror up to ourselves as well, to make sure that we are as green as we can, on the small stuff as well.
Understood. That's great. That's great. Thanks, Karin, for this. On the forecasting, I think it's really interesting because we need to understand and look at the whole supply chain, and logistics is often an area where it has the greatest saving opportunities and also reducing carbon opportunities as well. Can I ask how much in advance you share the forecast? Like how long term do you plan in advance, and what are the forums you collaborate with the suppliers on this journey? Like what are the forums? How regular do you meet with them?
Yeah. So we have monthly meetings with our supply chain around this, and we get forecast in from our end customers. So they give us input about the volumes that we need to roll out. So we have kind of a more fixed regular one, but if things changes, we meet them every month in different operational supply chain forums. So it's an ongoing dialogue all the time.
That's great. And do you also make commitment based on the forecast, or is the actual order?
We do. There are certain committed volumes, and then we can flex up and down. But I think what was really interesting with this supplier is that they said that we don't want to. Often you have volume discounts, when you do commercials, but they have also said that actually we would rather look at you maybe a forecast accuracy discount.
Yeah.
So we would be more inclined to give you, a discount on a accuracy basis than a volume basis, because it doesn't matter if you get a lot of order volume, but if we don't know when we're going to produce them, that still drives a lot of cost for us.
Yeah.
So really, really interesting discussions. And I think, that is just with one manufacturer supplier, but I'm sure there are a lot of the others that is more, doing services, etc. for us, that we can also sit down, where can we drive carbon out of the whole life cycle.
Okay, that's really interesting about incorporating forecast accuracy into one of the metrics and also maybe potential commercial model as well. So let's move on to another topic. I understand that SmartDCC is very interested in terms of diversity and inclusion. And you, as a leader yourself, Karin, are also personally having a lot of hats around this space. So can you tell us a bit more on how would you drive change and behaviors also in the workplace with this ESG angle and inclusion?
I think it's really interesting because DCC have been through a journey, a commercial transformation journey, but also a transformation journey for the whole company. So we've gone from more of a project-based led, organization into a more mature organization. And while we did that transformation journey, we could also look at, obviously culture, values and behaviors, but we could also look at the green aspect and the RBF aspect, not only the environmental aspect, but also, around, for example, travel policy and how we're heating up our facilities, etc., but also around the diversity and inclusion. So that has actually, resulted in a lot of different things. So if I start with inclusion, so we're looking at, volunteering, for example, and we have done over 450 days over the 450 hours, sorry, mainly in the areas of fuel poverty, because that's very, very close to our heart, of course, around environment, around STEM, So that's where we concentrate on. And then we did a D&I audit, diversity inclusion audit, to look at, what is DCC's strength and weaknesses. And that formed, part of the D&I strategy that we have launched. And from that, it's come out, a couple of actions or, a couple of initiatives. For example, we have monthly D&I forum, and I'm actually the D&I Exco sponsor for that, which I love. And then also we're looking at demographic data collection campaigns. We have a diversity lens when we look at performance review and pay gap reports. And what is really interesting here is that the next step for us is actually looking at our whole supply chain. So we can look at our company, 750 people. But if we say, in order to deliver these services as a public good for the whole society, we want to include our whole supply chain.
Mhm.
How much volunteering does have the whole supply chain done? What type of D&I, initiative do the whole supply chain have? And how much, are we working for social good? So I think, it's a different aspect to look at it. Collectively, we're responsible for, all this initiative, and we can learn from each other. And one of the things, and I don't know if you know this, Carrie, but, we work in suppliers. These big suppliers are really interested to work together with us. And we've done 2 really important, engagement around social impact last year. So, for example, we did a STEM camp in a school near Manchester together, with one of our suppliers, CDI. It's been, posted on LinkedIn, etc.
Yeah.
And then we did a lot of school workshop on smart cities with Net Company, also been posted. And I had the honor and, privilege to be in the panel, in the jury panel. And it was amazing to see this. I think they were only 10, 11, 12 years old kids. And, they from kind of a disadvantaged backgrounds areas. And they were so good. It was unbelievable, and when you're doing that, step out of your normal work, BAU work, and just going, you get really humbled to see, other people and see what passion, and you really, I think, it's really good for everybody to do that. Step out of your normal environment and, go and do these type of things. It really makes you, reflect over of the world, and the next generation, I would say.
Yeah, it's really meaningful, and it's great work about what you are doing, and also planting the seed with the new generation as well. What about internal employees, diversity and inclusion? If SmartDCC is being such a responsible business, would that be one of the recruitment criteria when you select your team? It needs to be matching these passions as well.
Absolutely. So if I start with commercial, which is my shop, so to say. So we have been driving, a commercial transformation over the past 2 years, which has resulted in a lot of, benefits. For example, we have removed silos. We have a much more collaborative, culture environment. We have launched, commercial academy, which is, driving driving training and competence development. But it also gave us a chance to hire in ESG skills into commercial. And I don't know if somebody may be wondering, why on earth is ESG or responsible business sitting in commercial in DCC? And that's because, as I said before, over 90% of our carbon footprint is coming from the supply chain, which is owned by commercial. And so it's been a great opportunity. And when you look at CVs nowadays, you can see much more that the ESG skills, more and more younger people are interested in this area. More and more younger people are actually, want to work for a purpose-led company and a company that, have a green agenda and take this type of thing seriously. And it's starting to trickle into people's, it's going to be a hygiene factor in the end, the same as you should be able to use PowerPoint and Excel.
Yeah.
You will have to have a certain level of ESG competence in order to actually do any job in companies. So we have started, we have a long way to go still, but we have started to look at that. If I answer the other part of your question around, diversity, I would say that we take this very seriously. And when we look at the employee engagement scoring and employee survey result, I'm happy to say that we always score very high on that. People feel like they can be themselves at work. We have also, diversity is such a big term, it's not just ethnic diversity. And we have an individual that is kind of our spokesperson for neurodiverse people. And he told me a story, and I got really humbled, and it was really interesting to hear. So he said he did the interview, and he's always very open with, his neurodiversity in the interview as well. And he thought, okay, I've done so many interviews with so many companies, and it's going to be a no. And then apparently, hiring manager came back and said, no, you have the job, and we just need to put measures in place to, accommodate. And he said he was just over the moon, and he's so thankful and happy to work for DCC, because what he says, he can't concentrate, long period of time. So everybody knows that every hour he needs, 5-10 minutes. So he will disappear from the team's meeting, and then he comes back. His manager knows, everybody, and because he's open about it, everybody knows, accommodate for that, and knows about it. And when we have, all hands, and I have invited him to my personal commercial huddle, and he talks about this, it's mind-blowing, because when you have ethnic diversity or gender diversity, of course you can see it. But with him, he looks like anybody else, you would say, a white male, Caucasian. And he said, people don't understand that I'm also probably more diverse, than some other people. So linking that to maybe my own personal story. So I am diverse for many reasons. So I was born in South Korea, but I was adopted to Sweden. So I grew up in Sweden, and now I live in UK. So I have a wealth of diversity when it comes to working in different environment and cultures. That of course, and I worked over many different, type of companies, big companies, smaller companies, public sector. I'm kind of semi-public sector now. On the buying side, I worked on the supply side many years in commercial, very, very commercial entities. So all of that different perspective, how you perceive the world, the way you think, how you innovate, how you interact with people, really benefit to having a rich and wealth experience from many different aspects.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Karin, for your sharing. It's great. We started off with, procurement best practice incorporating ESG, and end with how do we drive, internal diversity and inclusion within a company as well. So here, I think this is, the formal end of the webinar session, but then we will move on to Q&A. So let's, for those who are with us online, please type your question in the chat box, but I'll start with the questions that I see from the top. So I think we got a question about whether SmartDCC is using any sort of sustainability metrics to measure performance and to track carbon footprint.
Yeah. So if I had my head of sustainability here, she could answer much more in detail. She's great. But, obviously we measure scope 1 and scope 2, and we are trying to set a baseline for scope 3, which is much, much more challenging because a lot of our suppliers, there's not any, kind of standardized way to measure it. So some people measure it in certain ways. So what we set our task for this financial year is to try to get a baseline for scope 3. So we measure all of that, the same way as a lot of other companies doing.
Okay, great. And then the other questions I have got, it's a general one. Any tips for companies who wish to build build ESG practice into procurement team? What are your tips and advice for them?
I think no, it's a really great question. I think it needs to get on the EXCO, the top table agenda. And then it needs to be, because you often start small, you have 1 or 2 people, and 1 or 2 people can't change the whole company. And then it can't be that that's the ESG person. ESG is for everybody. Everybody contribute. We're all in the offices. We all travel. We're all having the lighting on. We're all having the heating on. So it needs to concern everybody. So I think my tip that we have done is we built like a responsible business framework that is kind of overarching, but we involve, people from all parts of the organization. I think, so you kind of incubate it, but it needs to be very clear that is the responsibility of everybody. So these people that are kind of change agent, they're driving the change and they are kind of advocate for it, but they need to work with the whole organization. And then everybody could do a little bit. They can, say, oh, if I do this, if I, for example, reusing lanyards when we have big seminars, big all hands meetings. That's one little thing. And that feels good. I actually contributed to not get so much plastic out there or production cost of that and waste of that. So make it everybody's business. So people feel like a corporate objective, of course, very good, because then people are interested in things that they measured on, especially if it's tied to bonus. Get it on the EXCO agenda. So the EXCO is talking about it, would be my tips around this.
Okay, great. And then we got another good one. It's as a leader, why is sustainability important?
So I think apart from, I think also with age, so obviously everybody should care about the environment, but I have to say, starting to be quite old, and when you have children and they grow up, you start to think about, the next generation. I want to have a word that is good for my children and my grandchildren, which I hope is not coming too soon, and their children. So it's something around, leaving something, leaving a legacy, contribute to a better world. So that is like a human right and human, thought process, I think, when you become a little bit older. And I think it's also very interesting that if you look at the younger generation, if I look at my daughter and my son, for them, working in a company that are environmentally responsible, has a purpose, is much more important than when I was young. I think when I was young, I didn't think so much about it, but now we have to do something. And young people, they will choose their employment, much more on purpose-based factors than it has been in the past. And they know which companies that are, blacklisted. They know. I was so surprised when my daughter talked about certain companies. She knew that's a good company environmental, that's not so good company environmental. So they know. So I think it's this, also from a company point of view, you have to do it. Otherwise, you want to attract talent in the future. So it's really important. But I think also as a leader, you are a role model. You are a culture leader as well as, leader from, business point of view. and it's not just the right thing to do, it's a necessary thing to do. It's, we all have to care about these things.
Yeah, I can confirm to those who are joining us online as well that Karin, even at the personal level, it is very, having really good habit in terms of no food waste, and everything like must be kept in a package storage, and no waste of plastic as well. So I can definitely confirm that. Thanks, Karin, for that. And then the other questions, which I'll combine them, it's whether SmartDCC uses any software providers or external to rate the supplier, and how do you manage the risk of non-compliance?
Yeah, good question. So we are actually very early stages here to look at that, and it's a very tricky one because first of all it costs money. So does the company take that cost? Should we push that on our supplier? And exactly as I said, what do you do with the existing supplier if they don't pass? So there's something that we look at possibly doing in the future. We're not doing it at the moment. But there are a lot of tools out there, and we're looking at, also tools around social impact. If we do something, can you quantify the social impact or social benefits? We're looking at, how would we rate, exactly as say, rate a supplier from this point of view? We are looking at all the suppliers. Are they committed to net zero goals? Do they have TCF, do the TCFD? We're looking at, do they have science-based target, or at least do they commit to get to science-based target, etc. Are they aligned with the government principle on the 2050 net zero agenda? So we're looking at all that, but we haven't yet chosen a tool how to rate them. What we have started to do then is doing benefit tracking, not only for financial benefits, but also for, so to say, non-financial benefits, and looking at, how can you also list all the non-financial benefits around, volunteering, social impact, carbon reduction, etc. And then later on, we are discussing how we can, together with our supply chain, maybe build a benefits framework around this. And of course, the goal is to be able to quantify that in money.
And do you provide that transparency in published reports on the website about the suppliers and also the commitment to sustainability and what DCC have done?
Yeah, so we have to actually make official all our contract that we're signing. So they are redacted from commercial things, because that is of course competitive information. But all our contract that I sign on behalf of DCC will have to be redacted and posted on our online on our webpage. So we have an obligation to do that. So they will all be in there.
Okay, great. I guess last question from my side before we wrap up, it's if you have to start all over again in terms of doing this transformation journey and pushing the ESG agenda, is there anything you would do differently?
Good question. I haven't thought about that. Let me have a think. I think for me, it would be great if it could be embedded in everything. So I was talking about, do an incubation and, try to, it would be even greater if I could start completely from scratch. I would like to kind of design the total, operating model, everything that is done everywhere in the company with an ESG, components. So it wouldn't be a separate program or a separate thing or a separate department. It would be just natural, the same as you do a budget process. You could have a carbon process, carbon reduction process. So it would be built in. So it wouldn't be a separate strategy. It would be part of the strategy, part of everybody's performance measures, part of the way the company is driving certain things. So I think if I could start it's a bit visionary. If I could start completely from scratch and build up my own company from scratch with hiring people and setting up processes and tools and everything, strategy, objectives, that's what I would like to do.
That's a great answer. Really incorporating these elements from recruitment to performance reviews and the bonus, the salary structure, that sort of thing. That's great to hear. So thank you very much, Karin, for your time, and also thank you everyone who attends today's webinar. We will be you will likely to receive a follow-up email within 24 to 48 hours with a link of the recording today's. So thank you again, Karin, for your time, and thank you all of us to join us. For joining today. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.